So how much money do you need to retire early? And when I say retire early, if you've been listening to this podcast for some time, you know it's not an early retirement that I'm in love with, but the idea that you could be done working, you financially no longer need money to be able to do everything that you want to do in life. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, which is how much money do you need to retire early? Now, this is probably one of my most asked questions, which is why I love addressing it, and that's what I'm going to be doing today. Now, I'm going to highlight 2 recent reviews as I haven't done this in some time. So I want you to know, always going to highlight recent reviews. Those that do leave reviews, thank you, because it helps more people find the show, and it's fun for me to see that it has been helpful. So this review comes from D. Merrick, who says, very informative, lots of useful information for getting the most out of your hard-earned retirement savings. I didn't know what I didn't know before listening in. And that quote right there, I didn't know what I didn't know, also I don't know what I don't know, that is something that I hear so often when people first reach out, which is, I want to retire early, I've saved and invested well, I just don't know what I don't know, and so I'm reaching out to you or another advisor or another firm, and I just am looking for more guidance and information because you truly cannot know what you don't know, obviously. So that's always fun for me to hear, and I hope that you do know more now, D. Merrick. The other review that I want to highlight here comes from Juan Peso, who says, Ari Gold, not to be confused with the Entourage agent. You can imagine, Juan, I haven't heard that joke before, just kidding there, of course. Ari is wise beyond his years and has deep knowledge in his wheelhouse. Early retirement. The length of his shows are ideal as well. He prepares and deeply cares, and it shows. Juan, thank you very much for that. And for those who continue to leave reviews, thank you for doing so. You can do that on the Apple Podcast app, and you can leave comments on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify, you can rate the show 5 stars there. So let's now hop into the show, which is all about how much money do you need to retire early. Now, here's the first thing I'm going to say about this, and this might surprise some of you, might not to others, but I'm anti-cookie cutter, and here's what I mean by that. I do not believe in asking someone, how old are you, what's your risk tolerance on a scale of 1 to 10, and here's how much you need, because to me, it just doesn't go deep enough. Now, if we go too deep, and I've seen this also be the case, where people track all their finances on spreadsheets to an unbelievable degree that analysis paralysis starts happening, and then they never retire early because there's always that question of, what's inflation going to be, and what if this other thing happens? And we could kind of do that forever, and so there's a fine balance there. So whenever I'm sharing information, I'm intentionally leaving out things that I don't want you to think about, and I'm going to include things that I say, hey, I really want you to think about this. So here's an example. When people say, how much do I need to retire early? Maybe they've seen an article that says, I need $1 million, or they remember, hey, my parents, they said they needed $1 million to retire, and you can adjust that for inflation, but I don't believe you need 500,000 or $1 million or 2 million or 5 million or 10 million. And the reason I don't believe in a number is because you very well may want to spend a completely different amount in retirement than your neighbor. And what I mean by that is when we look at a super basic example, and I'm all about making it very basic so that we can understand how does that apply to our situation, is let's assume that you have $1 million and you go, Ari, I am ready to retire early. Someone else, let's call him your neighbor has $10 million, and you both want to spend $100,000 a year. Don't think about taxes. Don't think about inflation yet. I promise I'll touch about that fun stuff in a moment. But if you don't invest those funds at all, once again, highly unrealistic here, you would run out of money in 10 years. So $100,000 over 10 years, $1 million. Your neighbor, they would just be fine because they're spending $100,000 a year, but they have $10 million. And so the example here is just to illustrate your expenses. That is the big variable here. It's really not about how much money you have, because if you have $10 million, but you want to spend $5 million a year, well, then great. You're going to last for 2 years, assuming you don't invest those funds. So when people say it's about this dollar amount or it's not, I'm not about a number. Now, I think having a number is a really helpful goal, so I'm not anti having a number. What I am all for is cash flow. How do you make sure you have enough income to never run out of money? And if you are retiring early, this is an even bigger conversation than if you're retiring at 65, because your funds more than likely will need to last for 30 plus years or so, looking at life expectancy. If we're trying to retire early, call it before 65, anywhere in that 50 to 65, which is when most people reach out to myself, well, in that case, we need our money to last for 40, 50 plus years. So that idea that we don't run out of money Well, I don't want you to have to go back to work because we didn't plan well. I have a few clients who have $0 in their investment account, and you're going, how on earth did they retire? Well, they have a healthy pension, they have rental income, and they have an inheritance. I have other clients who don't have any pension income, and they have a portfolio, 1.5, 2 million, $3 million, and that's supplementing their lifestyle needs. And so at the end of the day, when people say you need $1 million or 5 million or 10 million or a pension or rental income, you don't need any of those things. What you need is to replace your income. You need to make sure you can meet your expenses. And I tell people, and I've seen this time and time again, where people retire early because they went through some planning projections, but what they didn't do is actually plan their ideal retirement. So they said, okay, how much am I spending today? And they look at the bills and they go, maybe I'm spending $4,000 a month. So let me adjust that for inflation. Okay, so they want to spend $48,000 a year, and maybe there's still a mortgage. Maybe it's going to be paid off in a few years into retirement. Maybe they go, Ari, I don't care what the numbers say, and I've heard you talk about it in different episodes, but I want that mortgage gone. I want no debt in retirement, which a lot of my clients like. And in fact, I'm all for that. I joke with my clients, but I say, you never go out and host a party when your investment value goes up by $100,000, but you do when you are debt free. So it's not me ever telling my clients, hey, I don't want you to do that. It's saying, here's the options. Here's the opportunity cost. If we keep paying down the mortgage and we invest the rest, here's what it could mean for you. You might go, Ari, that's great, but oh my gosh, looking at that, this even further confirms I want to pay off that mortgage and have it done. I want one less expense in retirement. Wonderful. It frees up cash. It frees up headspace. Maybe you're sleeping better. I mean, try quantifying that. So that's when this financial planning, as you can probably tell by now, it's not black and white. And so let's get back to the example here. When it comes to, okay, how do we think through how much money we need to retire early and never have to, worry? It comes down to first creating what would really excite you. Not just saying, okay, if we have $4,000 a month, great. Does that allow you to pay the basics of gas and groceries and things like that? But are you adding travel onto that? And maybe it's for the first 5 years. Maybe it's for the first 10 years. Or maybe you want to see, can I do this forever? Not saying you always want to, but a basic example is, let's assume you want to spend, $5,000 a month. And I'm just coming up with this on the fly. Well, that's $60,000 a year. So we have that. Let's assume there's no mortgage. And you go, Ari, I want to travel. Maybe it's one big trip a year and maybe 2 or 3 smaller trips. And let's just say that's $10,000. So now we have $5,000 a month for $60,000 a year of basic living expenses, plus $10,000 a year for travel. And you might go, Ari, I want to do that for 10 years. So now let's assume you retire at 60. You're now 70. The reality is, I imagine you're going to still want to take those trips, or maybe you want to take less trips and gift more. Or maybe you say, Ari, I just want to be able to do other things. Plan for that. Always plan conservatively, knowing even if you don't use those funds, it can be used for something else. And when people do retire, you may have heard me talk about the retirement smile before. What this is, it's an analogy that says as you retire and you have your energy, you have your health, and you're so excited, you have your time, well, now I want you to go do these things. And in fact, you might be spending more than $10,000 on travel. Maybe it's $20,000 or $30,000, assuming your plan shows you can do so and still never run the risk of running out of money. I will be the first person to say, please go do those things. The real risk is you don't do them and you had the money to do them. And now you're going to pass away with millions of more dollars or hundreds of thousands of more dollars when you could have actually done really fun things and still been okay. Now, come with me along this smile analogy. Remember, now you've retired, you're at the top of this smile. Now think of this coming down a little bit, which I know is kind of hard to envision, but think of this smile now becoming more like a frown, almost getting a little bit more just direct linear. Well, now as this is happening, well, you're spending less. And what I mean by that is now let's assume you're in your 80s. Maybe you don't want to travel the same amount because the health or energy just isn't there. Now, if it is, wonderful. I want you to have a plan for that. But this is just looking at averages. So we have those first few years where we're doing everything we want. Then it tends to come down and maybe there's a few smiles and frowns in there a little bit, if you will. And then it shoots back up, and that coming back to that smile. Well, maybe at the end of your life, you go, all right, I want to be able to gift this, or I want to be able to spend more money on my children's wedding or fund their education or something like that. So to bring this all back together, and then I promise I have a few other points for you that I've addressed here that I always want to make sure I get across. And once again, Everything I'm saying today, this is from conversations with my clients. This is from things I've read, from messages I've received. I literally take all of this and put it into an episode that I hope in 15 minutes can make you think differently about an early retirement and really give more confidence. Now, if you haven't heard it, a few weeks ago, I did record an episode that was titled just Extra Episode, where I just put a little bit of background music to what I felt was a really powerful message about how do you make sure you have the mindset right in retirement. So everything I'm talking about today is about expenses. It's about how much money do we need. We haven't, of course, talked about taxes and inflation and these things yet, but these are important considerations. So now I want to highlight a few things on that realm, but right before I do so, I have my ebook out, and I'm not just saying this to highlight that. I'm saying this to say that's free. If you want to download it, great, please do. But really, I'm bringing it up here because when I ask people to download the free ebook, I ask a question, and I say, what are you doing right now that you cannot wait to no longer have to do once you're retired? And I've gotten some interesting responses, and I want to share them here because I think they may resonate. I promise this is not just some plug. I really think this is most helpful for you. And if you comment back, Ari, it wasn't helpful, or that wasn't what I was looking for, great. I actually want to know that information. And if it's the alternative of, no, I want more anecdotes like this, then I'll add more. So I'm always making this show your show. As I mentioned a few episodes ago, I'm a big podcast listener myself, and I always like listening to podcasts. And so when I hear podcasts talk or kind of go off topic, I'm always like, well, it's not why I tuned in here. So I really want to make this a show that you're really excited for every single Monday. So here's one thing that when I asked people, I said, what's one thing you do today that you can't wait to never do again? And a few of the responses were, Ari, I want to always wake up on a Monday and not have to think about my boss first. I was like, okay, that's an interesting response. Other people, it was, I want to be able to drink as much wine as I want and not worry about work the next day. Wonderful response. Here's an interesting one. I switched the question, and so if you go right now to the ebook, the question is, what are you so excited to do in retirement? And of course, I keep all emails and names anonymous, but this individual said, I don't want to have to go back to work and see people I don't want to see. Now, that's a big one that I don't think about because I love what I get to do. And if you can tell, I just feel lucky because I hit the jackpot of my job, and hopefully that will always be the case, as I believe it will be. But just want to put that out there. So when people say, Ari, I don't love what I do, or I just can't wait to never have to do this anymore. I have a client that comes to mind right now. I'll keep their name anonymous, but they really enjoyed what they did for many, many years, but the industry has just shifted and they no longer enjoy doing it. And so therefore it's, when am I in a position where I can walk away? My clients often don't want to walk away, but they just want to know, when can I, so that the finances allow you to go, hey, that's the easy part. It's now, am I ready to stop doing what I've been doing for so many years? So a quick tangent there, I know, but if you haven't already, you can check out more responses like that on my YouTube channel through just the comments or download the ebook. So now let's get back to the bulk of this episode. When do you know when you're in a position to retire early? Step one, I really want you, even if you are 5, 10, 15 years away from retirement, really think through how much do you want to be able to spend and what would excite you. That's what I tell people, because it's like the dreaming phase. And if you're doing this with your spouse and you're trying to get them interested in finances, which I have another episode on, it's way better to talk about, hey, let's dream about what trips we want to take. Let's dream really big about, okay, what do we really want to be doing? And write it down from the morning until you go to sleep. It's, hey, do I want to spend, my time golfing? Do I want to be able to volunteer? What do you want to do? And what might that cost? That's the first step. Step number 2 is going, okay, what assets, what pieces do we have to really make this happen? Okay, we have a 401k. Okay, we have an IRA. Okay, we have a Roth IRA. What are the tax implications of these things? That way you can go, okay, am I almost, ballparking it? Am I somewhat close to my goal? And then you're going, okay, how much more do I need to save in order to be able to reach that goal? Do I need to work 1 more year or 2 more years or 5 more years? And then you can do that with just, some legal pad paper, but it's best to do that with a planner. So either myself or another planner, please go through a planning process. And even if you don't move forward with them, I think you would have a ton of clarity of the value that they could provide, or you're going to go, oh my gosh, I actually want to do this. So that's helpful to know too. And then this is the biggest one I want to save for last here. So hopefully you all have kept tuning into this full episode, which is how much can you withdraw from your portfolio if you are following a certain strategy. Like, what's a reasonable amount that you could withdraw and never run the risk of running out of money? And so this is the strategy I use for clients. It's developed by John Guyton. It's called the Guyton's Guardrails approach, which is the following. And if you've heard me talk about this, then I apologize. I know I bring it up a lot, but when you're retiring early, you want to make sure you never run out of money. And so if you have, for example, $2 million, a lot of people will follow the 4% rule, which is the idea you could take 4% out and never run the risk of running out of money. And that's 4% every year. So take $80,000 a year out every year, and you'll be rest assured you will not run out of money for 30 plus years. It's helpful. The difference is if you're retiring early and you're 55 and this now gets you to 85, okay, great, but what if we're going to live a whole lot longer than that? Then it's not so fun. And so what I tell people is the Guyton's Guardrails approach, well, it was a study that was not designed to just invest in 2 asset classes like the 4% rule. It was investing in a whole sort of asset classes like international and real estate and small companies and value and growth. And it was saying you can be rest assured that if you follow this strategy, you will not run out of money for 40 plus years. So if you're retiring at 60, it's assuming you follow these rules and you withdraw certain ways and you pull income, according to these guidelines, you can be rest assured that you will not run out of money for 40 plus years. And the difference is you're not taking 4% out, you're taking 5.5% out. So that's kind of the higher limit, really 5.6, but anywhere between 5.2 to 5.6%, you can withdraw and never run the risk of running out of money, assuming you're following certain guidelines and investing a certain way. So when people go, I want to retire early, is it the 4% rule I should follow? Hey, that's even better. If you want to follow the 4% rule, but then implement the Guyton's Guardrails strategy, okay, awesome. So I never want my clients to go, okay, is there one specific way to do this? No, there's a ton of different ways. The difference is I don't want you to be cookie cutter. Please do not read an article online that says you need $1 million or $2 million or $5 million, because if you want to spend half of what your neighbor wants to spend in retirement, and that would still keep you happy because you're doing the things you want to do, well, the real risk is that you do not retire 5 years earlier, and you could have. The real risk is that you don't take extra trips, even though you had the money to do so, and still never run out of money. So you're probably connecting the dots right about now, which is, okay, there's a lot to this, number one. And then I'll always say number two, when it comes to financial planning, it's an art and a science. There's not one article that's going to sum it up perfectly. How do you collect Social Security? How do you think about life expectancy? When people just straight up go, Ari, how do I make sure I have enough money to retire early? I tell them, please listen to this podcast or let me have a conversation with you, because I don't want to just spit out a number of $1 million or $5 million or $10 million, because I've seen people with 500,000 retire early and feel really confident and happy. And I've seen the alternative where someone has 5 million and they don't feel that they have a strategy. And in fact, if they didn't have a strategy, they would be in trouble. So once again, this is what I love to do. If you don't know that already, I am a financial planner, the vice president here at Root, and I help people retire early because I love doing it. So once again, that is it for today's episode. If you have a question you want me to answer in a future episode, you can always submit that. If not, please know you can always reach out to me directly via email, or go ahead and submit the question. I have a little bit of a description here. You'll see a few resources. There's an ebook. If you want to just work directly with me, you can see the link there to apply for that. And I hope you all have a great rest of your Monday, or whatever day you are listening to this. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Early Retirement Show. If you have a question that you want answered in a future episode, you can always go to my website, earlyretirementpodcast.com. That's earlyretirementpodcast.com. And you can go ahead and submit a question that I'll look to answer in a future episode. Thank you all for listening. Please do rate it, review it, and share it with someone who you think would benefit from this information, if there's anyone out there that you know. I certainly appreciate it, and I will see you all each week. Hey guys, it's me again. Please be smart about this. Nothing in this podcast should be construed as financial, tax, or legal advice. Consult with your tax preparer or financial advisor before taking any action. This podcast is for informational purposes only.